When people around the world first discovered Korean entertainment, they were drawn in by something fresh and different. But in a global industry where attention moves quickly, creativity alone is not enough if audiences cannot connect with the content. So proud to propose. Before going into our two main arguments, then first some setup. So a clarification is that this is a value judgment debate from the perspective of the South Korean Ministry of Culture. As government, we believe that the adaptation of South Korean entertainment to appeal to global audiences is on that a positive change that is in line with the interests of the Ministry of Culture. Then, what exactly are the interests of the Ministry of Culture? 3 points. Firstly, to ensure the growth and stability of the Korean creative industry so it can create jobs, bring in export money, and make Korea better respected globally. And secondly, to provide the Korean citizens with a greater cultural experience and sense of pride enriching their lives. And lastly, and more importantly, the ministry has an interest in expanding Korean soft power internationally because cultural influence allows Korea to remain globally relevant and respected without relying on military or economic dominance alone. Then what does adaptation really look like? Firstly, making content more accessible, such as K-pop songs written in almost English, such as BTS's Dynamite or Butter, or working with Netflix to buy high quality subtitles, right? And secondly, a global marketing such as K-pop idols going on world tours or collaborations between Korean stars and global artists. However, we want to be very clear here. This does not mean quote unquote copying the rest or losing Korean identity, right? K-pop still contains very distinct sounds and formats, and K-drama series still showcase Koreans' values and culture. Moving into the second argument on global mainstream leads to a larger audience. While South Korean entertainment has enjoyed some global success, there are clear barriers that prevent it from becoming a part of the mainstream global culture without adaptation. Firstly, there is a clear language barrier as most people do not speak Korean, which means that thus, while K culture may have some fans that are willing to devote time and effort into overcoming that barrier, most people do not bother preferring, and they will most likely prefer other content that they can easily understand and access, right? Secondly, the culture is unfamiliar. No, thank you. And most people prefer to stick to formats and styles that they already know and enjoy, right? Which means that the people do not want to try Korean entertainment when it feels so-called alien to them. Lastly, then, these barriers mean that while K-culture may have some global popularity, it remains a subculture enjoyed by the smaller number of stands as opposed to something that can be enjoyed by much larger mainstream audiences. So what is this? What is the impact of this and why does this matter then? Firstly, this matters geopolitically because soft power changes how the world treats Korea, right? Countries with strong cultural influences are respected internationally and gain stronger diplomatic relationships, etc., etc. And when foreign citizens admire Korean culture, they are more likely to support Korean. No, thank you. Support Korean businesses, visit Korea, learn the language, and etc. Secondly, this brings a huge economic benefit, right? Because so-called mainstream means we aren't just selling to a small club of fans anymore, right? We are reaching billions of average listeners and viewers, and this leads to a massive new profits for global commercials and huge streaming numbers on Netflix. Going into the second argument then on how this creates more cultural diversity. The biggest threat to Korean entertainment right now is stagnation, making the same old things over and over again. If our music and movies never change and evolve, there's nothing to keep audiences interested or engaged, right? So why would K-culture stagnate with global adoption? If creators only focus on local domestic audience, they have no reason to take these risks, and they will just keep using the same old formulas because it is safe and proven to work on the audience. So empirically, this is true. Before Korea started adapting to global styles, many local shows and songs were criticized for being a so-called cookie cutter, right, of each other. Almost every show or romance drama was predicted as twist of a super rich boss falling in love with a poor worker or someone gets hit by a car, right? So this matters because soft power changes how the world views and treats Korea, as I already said. When millions of people consume Korean entertainment, they build emotional connections to Korea itself, and this thus increases tourism, support for Korean bands, and interest in the Korean language, which we view as very important, which is why we're so proud to propose.
On opposition, we believe that adapting South Korean entertainment specifically to please global audiences is harmful to the ministry's goals. To be absolutely clear, we are not against Western influence. Korean artists have always mixed global beats into their music for Korean fans. That is natural and good. What we oppose is when the industry stops making content for Koreans and start changing itself just to please foreign audiences. This looks like K-pop songs dropping the Korean language entirely for their lyrics, or K-dramas abandoning relatable, emotional Korean stories in favor of Hollywood-style thriller productions. Moving on to rebuttals then. They said that adaptation greatly expands the audience of K-culture to the global mainstream. Mainstream success is not unique to adaptation. Squid Game, Parasite, and earlier BTS songs already became global phenomena while being deeply Korean. Their own examples prove that authenticity, not adaptation, is what attracts audiences. Second, their model creates dependency on Western validation. Notice their mechanism: English lyrics, Western radio play, Western-friendly beats. That means success is no longer determined by Korean creativity, but by whether foreign gatekeepers approve of Korean content. The Ministry of Culture should prioritize cultural sovereignty, not restructuring the industry around foreign tastes. Third, the gateway argument is overstated. People consuming a fully English BTS song are not necessarily engaging with Korean culture. They're just consuming another global pop product. Exposure is meaningless if the content itself becomes culturally diluted. Finally, pride does not come from Korea succeeding by imitating global trends. Pride comes from the world respecting Korean culture on its own terms. Moving on to the first argument. Adaptation hurts the unique appeal of the Korean entertainment industry. The reason for the global popularity of South Korean entertainment was not its similarity to Western pop culture. It was its own uniqueness and difference from the pre-existing global culture. People enjoy seeing something new and fresh, and Korean entertainment was able to provide that to the global audience. This is evident if you look at the biggest hits of the industry. Psy's Gangnam Style was a massive global hit precisely due to showcasing a comical view of a society that the globe was unfamiliar with. Parasite won the Oscar for portraying the stark contrast between different economic classes in the Korean context. Squid Game was actively themed around traditional Korean children's games. So when the industry adapts in an attempt to appeal to global audiences, it actually accomplishes the very opposite. It loses the unique appeal that drew in the global audiences to begin with. It turns Korean entertainment into a mere carbon copy of the same pop culture that the global audience has always seen. As such, Korean entertainment fails to maintain a consistent presence, simply fading away as a temporary fad as people turn back to the original pop culture rather than just choosing a Korean copy of it. Preventing Korean entertainment from devolving into a copy of Western culture is essential for the Ministry of Culture to ensure industry sustainability. Moving on to the second argument. Adaptation makes Korean entertainment less relatable for the Korean citizens. We believe that the priority for the ministry has to be the Korean citizenry, because while the global success of Korean entertainment is great, the culture needs to be first and foremost for the Korean people. The problem with adaptation is that it turns what was meant to be content for our people to enjoy into something that is foreign and alien to them. This happens in a few ways. First, the focus of the content shifts completely. Instead of telling deep emotional stories that speak to real Korean life struggles and values, shows focus on generic Hollywood-style action or monsters just to get clicks from foreign streaming apps. Second, the adaptation changes the language of the content. Korean citizens end up having to use dictionaries, translations, and subtitles to understand the full meanings behind their own popular media. Third, the goals of the production companies completely change as well. They no longer care about the recent trends or interests of the audience inside Korea. They only care about what is trending on global apps, creating a massive cultural gap between Korean viewers and Korean media. The outcome of this is that the Korean audience no longer have access to a cultural experience that is truly theirs, because if the Korean entertainment industry does not produce content for our people, no other country will make it for us. This is the ministry failing its primary obligation to its own people, and is something that we should absolutely oppose, and I'm proud to oppose.
In the modern world, culture that is not seen is culture that does not matter. This debate is about whether Korean culture is seen at scale, so proud to propose. Firstly, moving on to the rebuttals then. We say that opposition wrongly assumes that appealing to global audiences means imitating Western culture or becoming dependent on Western validation. But we say that this is false, because adaptation is not imitation, it is accessibility while preserving the core Korean identity and the languages, themes, or aesthetics, or whatnot. We say that in fact, the global success of Korean entertainment shows the opposite. We say that the appeals comes from its unique cultural identity and also adaptation simply allows the uniqueness to be discovered at the scale rather than remaining inaccessible, right? Also, we say that opposition is wrong to say that adaptation makes Korean entertainment less relatable to Koreans, because Korean audiences are not removed from the process of globalization. We say that they're the same consumers who already support and shape the industry, and the core themes and social pressures or relationships or whatnot still remain Korean, and so reliability does not disappear just because the format becomes more globally accessible. We see that in fact, globally successful successful Korean content also reflects real Korean society more accurately because it's produced at a higher quality and in a wider scale in the first place. We told you that an adaptation does not reduce domestic relatability, but rather expands it and reaches it while keeping the same Korean lived experience as a theme in the first place as well. That is why this debate is not about whether Korean culture should exist. We tell you that both sides agree it should, and we tell you that this debate is about what version of Korean culture best serves the ministry's goal in this hyper-globalized world. We tell you that on our world, adaptation does not mean erasing the Korean identity like I mentioned before, but it's simply saying that adaptation simply means making Korean entertainment easier for international audiences to actually emotionally access through things like language accessibility, international collaborations, or whatnot. So therefore, we're saying that we're scaling its influence, right? More importantly, we told you that the Korean public continues to support this evolution of Korean culture as citizens who taxes funds or these for these industries and they're the ones who are doing this, whose national identity is tied to the culture's success in the first place as well. We said that events like Pyeongchang Olympics and the global success of Korean entertainment shows that the pride comes not from preserving culture unchanged, but from Korea becoming internationally recognized as modern, democratic, and influential. Then with that said, move on to the extensions then. We said that culture is not only about how foreigners see Korea, but how Koreans see themselves as well. We said that after colonialism, war, or economic insecurity in Korea, Korea's identity was long overshadowed by all these large powers globally, right? We tell you that global Korean entertainment changed this by making Korean language or aesthetics and storytelling internationally respected. This creates pride and ownership for the citizens, where citizens invest in the culture seen as globally relevant, and therefore we say that adaptation strengthens this actually, but this by keeping Korean culture actually accessible and influential in the globalized world. We tell you that a culture people are proud of is one they preserve, not isolate so adaptation strengthens or whatnot. Then move on to the third argument then about soft power and algorithms. We tell you that the final reason we support this policy is because Korean entertainment functions as one of South Korea's most important sources of soft power. We tell you that entertainment determines how global audiences emotionally perceive Korea, which directly affects tourism, brand trust, foreign investments, and diplomatic goodwill in the first place. We told you that this is why adaptation is not optional. It's a prerequisite for culture to survive in the global markets in the first place. We say that without adaptation, Korean content is simply not surfaced enough to generate soft power in the first place, right? However, soft power only exists if Korean culture is actually visible internationally. We tell that in the modern media systems, visibility is shaped by global platform algorithms such as Netflix and YouTube, which prioritizes engagement and accessibility across global audiences. This means that culturally accessible content is far more likely to be surfaced and circulated, while culturally dense or unfamiliar content risks remaining invisible in the first place. Once the exposure happens, it changes into real geopolitical and economic benefits as well, with stronger tourisms and greater foreign investments. And countries with strong cultural influence are simply treated more favorably on the global stage, and we don't want this to happen on South Korea. So proud to propose.
The most beautiful parts of culture are often the parts that are difficult, unfamiliar, and deeply local. Some of the world's most meaningful art exists precisely because it refuses to compromise itself for mass appeal. But government creates a world in which those aspects are softened, simplified, or reshaped by maximizing global appeal. We believe that Korean media should remain distinctive, culturally grounded, and accountable first to Korean identity, not international trends opposed. Now, moving on to some clarifications then. This debate is not about whether foreigners should enjoy Korean entertainment, because in the status quo, they already do. The real debate is whether the state should actively encourage Korean entertainment to reshape itself around foreign consumption, right? And this is where the government side actually has their biggest contradiction, right? Games such as, movies such as Squid Game which are claimed to be adapting because it is successful, became successful precisely because it remained deeply Korean. It explored cultural issues and structural issues within the Korean society, used traditional cultural children's game, reflected Korean culture, and was performed primarily in Korean. That is why its global success did not come from westernization, it actually came from authenticity. And this proves our point, right? Korean entertainment does not need to dilute itself to succeed internationally. Opposition believes the role of culture is to express identity, not to perform for validation. Now, moving on to some refutations then. Firstly, in terms of how adaptation greatly expands the audience of K-culture to the global mainstream. Because Ella already gave you multiple layers of rebuttals, I just wanted to quickly point out on how they massively understate the trade-off, right? Once companies realize English songs in Western formats make more money, the industry systematically shifts resources away from unique Korean storytelling towards safer, globally marketable content. Over time, this homogenizes the industry and weakens the distinctiveness that made Hallyu successful in the first place. Secondly, though, about how adaptation enables greater cultural innovation and diversity. Their entire argument assumes innovation adaptation only happens and comes from foreign adaptation, which is historically false. Korea's most creative works succeeded precisely because they were rooted in uniquely Korean experiences, such as Squid Game critiquing the Korean depth culture, Parasite also exploring Korean class inequalities as well. These are not products of westernization, they are products of Korean specificity. Secondly, though, adaptation does not necessarily create diversity. It often creates homogenization, right? Once companies discover what appeals to global audiences, they converge towards the same profitable formulas, such as English hooks, Western pop cultures, pop structures, as well as Netflix-style pacing. Instead of diversity, you get every single group and every single drama trying to resemble the same type of globally marketed template. Thirdly, though, about how their cookie-cutter analysis misunderstands why repetition happens in the first place. Repetition comes from profit incentive and great entertainment corporations, not from Korean culture itself. In fact, global adaptations worsen because companies become even more risk averse when billions of dollars in foreign markets are involved. They invest in internationally safe content rather than niche experimental Korean stories, right? Finally, and most importantly, they frame the ministry's goal as chasing novelty. But in fact, the Ministry of Culture's role and their main role and incentive is not just to maximize global entertainment trend, it is to preserve and develop Korea's cultural identity. If innovation comes at the cost of structural distinctiveness, the ministry has failed its mandate. Now, moving on to our third constructive and our most important constructive about how adaptation actually causes the industry to lose ownership of its intellectual property. The massive scale required to appeal to the global mainstream forces our creators to give up the legal ownership of their own work. This happens through a clear process where the scale itself is too expensive, right? To compete globally and access the mainstream international audience, creators must rely entirely on massive foreign streaming platforms for funding. As a result, producers are forced into buyout contracts by these streaming platforms. In exchange for covering upfront production costs, these foreign platforms instead take 100% of the intellectual property rights. Because foreign corporations own the legal rights, all back-end royalties, merchandise, as well as spin-off profits flow straight out of Korea. Long-term profits flow overseas rather than to our own creators and producers. This is a systematic trend across the industry. For instance, when Squid Game was adapted for a global platform, it generated nearly $900 million in value, right? But yet, because Netflix owned their intellectual property, the Korean creators received zero extra royalties. The same trap actually applied to other global hits, such as All of Us Are Dead, effectively turning our creative industry into a cheap subcontract factory for Western companies. The outcome of this is that the economic benefits of international success do not actually go to our own local broadcasters and creators. Instead of building a sustainable domestic industry, we are using our finest talent to enrich foreign tech empires. This is the ministry failing its obligation to ensure the long-term independence of our creative economy. Therefore, so proud to oppose.
BTS and Blackpink only got successful after they were able to adapt to global audiences. Parasite became internationally celebrated not only because it was uniquely Korean, but because class inequality was a universal issue audiences everywhere could relate to. Expanding the audience to the globe does not just allow for Korean entertainment itself to become more popular, the growth rises exponentially into aspects of tourism and branches into several forms of fans. This may look like creating idol cards and collecting them, or fan art that shows the public interest in the culture. Moving on to straight rebuttals then, they say that Korean entertainment became successful precisely because it remained deeply Korean. Even if we grant that Korean entertainment initially became popular because of its cultural uniqueness, it only explains how Korea first entered the market, not how Korea should expand its influence now. The Ministry of Culture is not asking how Hallyu started, it is asking how to maximize the Korean influence going forward onto today. Making things that started niche, but there are many things that actually started niche but actually developed. Japanese anime initially succeeded because it was uniquely Japanese, but global expansion happened through adaptation, professional dubbing, and whatnot. We want this to happen to K-pop too. They say once again this distinctive Hallyu wave. We agree that Hallyu was distinctive, but distinctiveness alone does not explain why some Korean entertainment became global while other equally Korean content remained domestic. They also say how it makes Korean entertainment less relatable for Korean citizens, but our main response to this is that universal themes do not erase our meaning for Koreans. Squid Game remained deeply Korean while also resonating worldwide and aiming for a global audience. But even if this is untrue and you don't buy this, we are willing to trade it off with the incentive of the Ministry of Culture. The ministry's objective is not to relate to domestic audiences, but to international cultural influences. Even if there is a reduction in domestic relatability, the significant gain in the external aspects outweigh this possible harm. They also talk about the loss of ownership, but this is an extremely harmful slippery slope. Global collaboration does not equate to the loss of ownership because Korean companies still produce, license, and profit from these and control these networks, and adding subtitles, global themes, or international collaborations does not suddenly transfer the ownership to the West or wherever you want to go to. Moving on to the clash then, about who creates a more successful level of Korean influence in two parts. First of all, in soft power. Firstly, adaptation increases accessibility because by reducing language and cultural barriers through global styles, collaborations, and etc., Korean entertainment becomes easier to consume for the average global audiences. This increases the exposure to on a large scale, right? Soft power is particularly important for South Korea because it lacks things like natural resources. Secondly, adaptation will prevent creative stagnation because without global competition, producers will likely rely on these repetitive formulas that only satisfy the domestic audiences. But secondly, about the actor of the Korean Ministry of Culture and their incentives. As Evelyn already tells you, there are three main incentives. First, to be able to ensure the growth and stability of Korean creative industry so that it can create jobs, bring export money, and whatnot. But secondly, it is to provide the Korean citizens with great cultural experiences and a sense of pride enriching their lives that only comes when the global audience is able to actually understand what these Korean cultures are about. But more importantly, the ministry aims to expand Korean soft power, as Erica already told you. We best align with this because adaptation directly expands the global reach and revenue while also increasing the international recognition and pride in the Korean culture. At the same time, it maximizes the soft power by turning Korean entertainment into a globally consumed mainstream product rather than a very limited and niche only existing in a small South Korean community. For these reasons, we take the debate home.
K-pop didn't go global by becoming Hollywood. It went global by keeping its culture so proud to oppose. Two responses that can literally demolish their claims. First of all, the claim how like K-culture can be recognized more internationally. The reason why K-culture was recognized more internationally is because of the fact that it's Korean and it is a completely new and varied experience. If you make adaptation, there is no longer a big distinction. Then there's no point for people to go for K-culture. If there's no distinction, rather people will go for pop. I don't think their points have any distinctions with pop at the very least. But second of all, about how adaptation creates better engagement towards Western culture. One simple example can bring this point down. BTS recently made a new song that had a lot of Western elements, such as having the whole song in English lyrics or having this beat in a very westernized way. This had very, very bad and negative responses than they thought of. They had Korean people complaining about why they didn't keep it, why they kept it so westernized. They think that they criticized them so much for that, and Western people, they didn't give a lot of attention because they already have alternatives for Western songs. They already have great pop artists like Sabrina Carpenter that make greater and better pop songs like this. They have no incentives for them to listen to BTS songs, and that is what made BTS fall down for this comeback, and that is why their case is just exactly gonna fall down like that as well. Moving on to Clash 1 then, which is about which side better actually sustains Hallyu. This debate is an actor motion in the scope of the South Korean Ministry of Culture. Thus, both sides need to analyze what will be in the interest of the South Korean Ministry of Culture that actually helps Hallyu sustain not only in the short term but also in the long term. Under this, what did proposition tell you? Their model creates a structured incentive for homogenization. Once English lyrics, Western pacing, and global marketable formulas became more profitable, companies systematically prioritize safer international content over unique Korean storytelling. Over time, this weakens the very cultural distinctiveness that make global audiences interested in Korea in the first place. They also talk about creating cultural diversity. We don't know how this is strategic in any way. Adaptation in this debate should equate to homogenization, not diversity. Prop assumes that making content more globally accessible automatically increases cultural diversity. I don't think this is true in any way. When entertainment is adapted for global audiences, it is usually adjusted towards global expectations, which can include simplified culture references, English heavy dialogue, or universal tropes. That does not diversify cultures, it standardizes it. Thus, instead of more cultures being represented, we get fewer uniquely Korean narrative elements. This is not adaptation and diversity. This is homogenization. Proposition diversity isn't created by sanding down cultural edges. It's created by preserving them. This tackles Evelyn's second argument, but also challenges Erica's whole 2 minutes of her speech. Please note that Korean culture is being hindered when this adaptation happens. You can't buy their claims when they're choosing to ignore our claims that literally challenge their whole case. But what then we tell you? On our side, we told you how Korean entertainment maintains long-term stability and sustainability because it preserves a unique cultural identity that no other industry can replicate. People can already consume Hollywood directly, and the reason they came to Korea was that Korea offered something different. We have already explained this in several ways from our Elo's constructive. I think we bring this first clash home. But second clash then, which is about who should Korean entertainment ultimately serve. Government framed culture from the get-go primarily as an export industry. We believe the ministry's first obligation should be towards Korean citizens and the long-term independence of the Korean culture creative industry. Hallyu didn't intend to spread Americans. It was built for Koreans to learn our cultures more easily. Thus, even if it becomes super generous and accept their points, we still believe that if the South Korean Ministry of Culture's main intention were to spread culture, we think that our burden push and arguments are enough to prove why they will be following Op's case. But what does government look like? Under government, production companies increasingly reshape content around foreign algorithms, foreign audiences, and foreign investors. Korean stories became less relatable domestically, while ownerships and profits increasingly flow to global corporations like Netflix instead of Korean actors themselves. Thus, this breaks down the whole purpose of South Korean ministries of culture's whole intention of spreading culture, and this is something negative as this doesn't correctly portray their incentives. But even if you negate this point, the fact that we stretch our points and tell you that we still make foreigners interested with Korea's unique trait is a contributing factor that makes Prop's case not mutually exclusive. So if Prop's plan is to make Korean entertainment more global, we might as well save time and just rename K-dramas to season one of Squid Game into Squid Game but Western culture dominated. We bring this debate home, so proud to oppose.
The world did not fall in love with Korean entertainment because it was familiar. It fell in love with it because it was unapologetically unfamiliar. The more this industry chases global approval, the more it abandons the very uniqueness that made the world care in the first place. We strive for a Korea that is respected for having its own voice, not one that slowly rewrites itself into an echo of every other westernized media opposed. First question directly then about which side can actually sustain Hallyu, right? While the government side consistently argues that resisting adaptation preserves Korea's cultural authenticity, they overlook a crucial point that the ongoing successes and growth of the Korean wave, or Hallyu, which continues to thrive precisely is because of Korea's commitment to authentic and culturally rich content. We already explained that the expansion of Hallyu is deeply rooted in Korea's ability to produce unique and original contents that reflect its culture, values, as well as social realities. We think government's example about BTS or like Blackpink is actually what we actually fear, because now both groups are seen as pop and not just K-pop, because there is no unique characterizations and characteristics that distinguish them from other westernized groups. Now, second question then about who should Korean entertainment actually ultimately serve. Government increasingly treats culture as an expert commodity, right? We believe that ministry's first obligation and the most important obligation is to Korean citizens, and the long-term independence of the Korean creative industry. Under their world, production companies stop prioritizing Korean audiences and begin optimizing around foreign algorithms, foreign investors, and foreign approval. Korean stories become less emotionally grounded in Korean experiences, while ownership as well as profits increase flow overseas. Their side never properly responded to our IP analysis that we gave in our third constructive. Squid Game generated enormous global value, yet Netflix owned the rights and captured the long-term profits, right? That is not cultural empowerment. That is Korea becoming a subcontract factory for foreign tech corporations. Finally, and most importantly though, government relies on a false binary. They say either Korea adapts for the global mainstream or becomes irrelevant. But Korean entertainment already became globally respected while still remaining deeply Korean. We are not against evolution or foreign investment or foreign influence. What we oppose is reshaping Korean culture primarily for foreign consumption only. Culture is not strongest when it is easiest to consume. The things people truly remember are the things with identity, texture as well as roots. For these reasons, so proud to oppose.
We agree that Korean entertainment did not become Hollywood to become popular, but they became popular by becoming Korean first, then adapting to the global audience. So proud to propose. Moving on to the three main issues on side opposition then. Firstly, opposition's examples of BTS's Arirang being criticized does not prove harm for adaptation at all. It only shows that any globally successful culture will face some kind of domestic debate about style or direction in the first place. That's a normal cultural evolution, not loss of authenticity in the first place, right? We told you that BTS is still Korean in terms of the language and training systems and the themes, which is exactly why it became globally successful in the first place. So therefore, we say that domestic criticism does not prove how adaptation weakens Korean culture. It rather proves Korean culture is strong enough to be discussed or evolved and still dominate globally in the first place, right? Second, we want to say that they misunderstand how modern culture influence actually works. We say that opposition assumes culture spreads naturally if it's quote-unquote authentic, but in reality, we say that modern culture, cultural consumption is controlled by global platform algorithms and attention systems. We say that if Korean content is not accessible and optimized for engagement, it simply is not surfaced or discovered at scale in the first place. And we say that means their model doesn't preserve culture, but it makes it invisible visible in the first place, right? We said a culture that is not seen cannot influence or grow or sustain itself internationally from the get-go. And we also say that even if opposition is right, that adaptation involves some trade-offs. We will tell you why this trade-off is massively outweighed by our side, right? Firstly, we say that they choose symbolic purity over global visibility, but a culture that is not seen in modern algorithmic-driven platforms cannot generate influence at all in the first place, meaning that preservation without reach is just irrelevant, right? We said that secondly, they prioritize authenticity over long-term benefits. The cultural industries that refuse to evolve become less competitive and eventually lose relevance in global entertainment markets and from the get-go, like we mentioned before. Finally, we said that their claim that adaptation undermines ownership is false because Korean creators still so fully control authorship and content. What changes is the distribution, not identity, right? We say that BTS is still fundamentally Korean in language, trading systems, and themes, proving that adaptation does not erase identity but enables global success proposed.